Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this webinar, Reducing Chaos During an Active Threat, Incident Action Planning and Coordinated Response. My name is Scott Lowry. I'm the president of StrataSite. And just real quick, my background is that I retired from law enforcement after 25 years in Northwest Ohio at the rank of lieutenant. Beyond that is that I'm the lead trainer for two Department of Homeland Security courses in regards to crisis management for schools. And what that really means is that I get the privilege of traveling across the country and working with different communities in regards to all things school safety, writing that emergency operation plan, prevention of violence in the building, all the way through from response to recovery. And why I bring that up is that we at StrataSite have a deep understanding of all things school safety. Obviously, is that today we're talking about incident action planning and the importance of having a plan for responding to a critical incident in a school building. Is it and regards to what StrataSite is that StrataSite is a cloud-based platform that allows communities to create that incident action plan so that we have that understanding of what the schools are doing and what emergency services from the community are going to do. And throughout this hour is that we're going to spend some time talking about what that looks like. How do we do that? And making sure that that plan that we create checks that box in regards to a realistic plan that we're dialed in and what we have on paper, right, is going to work in the real world. Before I get too far into it, I've got a couple of polling questions that I want to throw out to you. And these polling questions, number one, this first one is the job description. Is that I just kind of want to get a feel of what everybody, what your background is. They're 100% anonymous. Is that just go in and check the box that is most appropriate to your and just kind of giving me that. I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to have the opportunity to fill that in. We're going to end that poll and then be able to share that with everybody. 20 of you are law enforcement. We've got a firefighter here, 7 from emergency management, and 17 of you from education. And it really is that when we look at this, is that realizing that it really does take an entire community to be able to respond to an active shooter event at a school. Is that I think that for us to be able to talk about that community-wide response to an active shooter is that we first have to talk about what's going on inside the building and that active shooter protocol that we as schools have. Is that the examples that I have here is that we've got from the alert system, the CRACE program, Alice from Navigate 360, Run, Hide, Fight. All three of those are protocols in regards to what we want our staff and students to do during that critical incident, during that active shooter event. Now, standard response protocol, which is a process for different levels of securing the campus, all right, to put that in a very generic form, is that SRP is quite honestly is that it's the gold standard in regards to securing campuses. If you have not taken a look at what I Love You Guys is doing, I highly recommend that you do. It's really straightforward and easy for staff to understand what the responsibility, what we're expecting them to do for different types of levels of securing the campus. But when we look at this concept of these different protocols, is that, and keeping it generic and just talking about the run, hide, fight, is that, we've evolved over this throughout history in this country. Is that, we went from having nothing to that hallmark event where Columbine changed our thought process in regards to what we're doing inside the school, and to the point today where we've got enhancements in regards to just simply, there's more than just shutting the door and locking the door. Options, is, to use that Alice term, is that giving staff and student options on regards to what we want them to do. When we look at these protocols, though, is that I think that there's some thought that needs to go into it. All of them are rock solid, but is that that integration of that process into the culture of our building, and really creating that mindset, is that we don't want to scare people with this information. It's just enhancing their situational awareness, quite honestly, is that if that dynamic event happens, that they have the ability to respond appropriately to that. And I think that, is that there's got to be some evaluation in regards to, as an entire community, is that, are we dialed in on regards to what the schools are doing, and through that stakeholder, those stakeholders, the 911 center, is that whatever protocols that we're using, whatever terminology we're using in those school buildings, the 911 center understands what that verbiage means. What is it that's happening inside that building? And if we train those 911 dispatchers on that process, is that when a staff member calls 911 during that active shooter event, as that they could provide some guidance in regards to, remember, your protocol is this, and this, and then, elevating the capabilities of that person that's on the other end of the phone. From a law enforcement perspective, is the understanding the dynamics of rapid evacuation, is that we've got law enforcement responding to the building and with high elevated heart rate, adrenaline in their bodies, and if they're not prepared for what that rapid evacuation may look like, it could create sensory overload. So is that when we're training law enforcement, our cops, in that active shooter response, is that having just a slice of that pie, talking about what it is the schools are doing and how they're doing it. And I think that the same with fire and EMS, maybe not to the level of law enforcement, but just an awareness from the fire and EMS perspective on regards to what is going on inside the building. All of those. Yes, thank you. See, Shannon taking care of me. I got Shannon on the backside doing all the admin stuff, and she's rocking it. This polling question: does your community have a coordinated response protocol for responding to an active shooter event? Thank you. Yes, no, or I don't know. What we've got is 33 of you do have, 4 of you do not, and 11 of you do not know. And not knowing is okay. Is that, but I think that leaves room for that engagement, those conversations. Is that, especially if you're from the school perspective and you're like, I don't even know what coordinated response is, let alone whether or not we have that protocol, and that's fair. It's just that my challenge to you, your homework is that when you leave here, is to start asking those questions. At the end of this webinar, you're going to have enough information to be able to ask relevant questions about what's going on in regards to emergency service, because there has to be this marrying up of what we're doing inside and outside. When we're looking at that training that we're conducting with our staff and students, is that understanding that content that has been created by whatever organization you're using, Run, Hide, Fight, Alice, Crace, doesn't matter, is that there's got to be some considerations that we address in regards to our community specifically. And there may be particular nuances within each one of those protocols that you just don't care to implement for whatever reason. And so making and customizing it for our community and what works in our own backyard. And thinking about the building considerations. We always talk about shut the door, lock the door, barricade the door, and how important that is for the classroom. But if I've got a brand new school building that I walk through the front door of it and it's all glass, there's a lot of glass, that lockdown protocol has pretty much been thrown out the window. That's not applicable to this particular building. So we need to have specific considerations for our school building. And thinking about when we deliver this curriculum to our staff, specifically, is that do they walk away from it feeling empowered? And what do I mean by that is that do they feel competent in being able to implement the protocols that we have? Is that there's this philosophy of the logical why, right? Everything we do, that there has to be this logical why. And so when we're talking to school staff, is that this is my experience. First of all, is that realizing from a law enforcement perspective, is that we're dealing with normal human beings. And we can't try and elevate normal human beings to think like cops and firefighters do. Is that's not realistic. And so there's only a certain level of competency that we're going to be able to obtain, not nearly that of what law enforcement has in regards to violence. So, but there's some hand holding that has to happen. It's teaching them the science behind what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. When they have that why, is that it will resonate with them better, and they'll digest that, and they're more apt to be able to apply it appropriately. And there's when we look at each one of the protocols, is that I truly believe from a realistic standpoint in evaluating previous school shootings in America, is that there are some gaps, is that we need to have additional conversations with our staff about these considerations. And the first one, and probably the one that generates the most conversation, is this one here, is that we have a situation in our building, violence erupts in our building, staff shuts the door, locks the door, barricades the door to the point the 75th Ranger Regiment can't get in that room, has accomplished what they're supposed to accomplish. Those 22 kids in that classroom with that teacher are safe, all right? But then all of a sudden, there's a 14-year-old girl on the other side of that door, beating on that door, begging for her life. What is it that we're telling staff to do? A vast majority of the time is that the curriculum is be quiet, stay out of sight, don't say anything, don't do anything, ignore that. And I truly believe that that's not a realistic approach to this. Not opening the door is the right thing. But somewhere along the line is that we've come up with this idea that the bad guy is going to lure a student to come to the door, knock on the door, and try and get the staff member to open up the door. It's never happened in the real world, ladies and gentlemen. So is that based on data, what we know is that not opening the door is the right answer, but giving staff an understanding of what it is you want them to do. All right. Teaching them what cover is, going to the door, utilizing cover, something that provides ballistic protection, and yelling through the door to that child, baby, you see that door down at the end of the hallway? I need you to go now, get out of the building. And she prays to the good Lord above that child makes it out of the building alive. that's a real world application. You're giving them tools to be able to deal with this dynamic, and by just simply saying ignore it, click next slide, is really doing a disservice to your staff. What are we training students to do if they get locked out of a classroom? A lot of moving parts of every school building in America throughout the day. Not everybody is tucked into their classrooms. And so making sure that students have the information on what it is you want them to do. And it's just simply running. All right. Get out of the building. Go as far away from the building as you can get. All right. We'll get to that when they run in a minute. But that rapid evacuation has to happen. Students that are in the bathroom, please do not tell students to get into a bathroom stall and get up on a toilet. Every protocol in America says don't put yourself in a confined space. Always have the ability to move. And from a law enforcement perspective, we absolutely understand that. All right. Is that when bullets are flying, I don't want to put myself in a confined space. So don't have your students do that. Their survivability almost goes to zero if they're in that bathroom stall and bad guy finds them. And so giving them real world options, things that work in the real world. Special needs population, all those students that fall into this category: wheelchair bound, blind, deaf, non-English speaking, those within the autism spectrum. All of those need to be considered when we're looking at our processes, all right? Staff members that have those students under their responsibility have to be given a few more tools in their toolbox in regards to what it is that we want them to do and how we want them to do it. Talk about the fact that the buildings of a lot of moving parts, all of those different things, is that realizing that in studying active shooter events, school shootings in America, the number one time of day is at lunchtime. The number two before school, number three after school. It's not when everybody's tucked into their classrooms. So realizing what we know and when it's likely to happen is that looking at lunchtime. What is the expectation of our staff with 152 kids in the cafeteria at lunchtime and violence erupts? What does that process look like? I don't think you drill that, but I think that there has to be that consideration in educating staff on what it is you want them to do. Make sure it's realistic. 152 kids running through two 36-inch doors is not realistic. School bus drivers. Students are loading or unloading on the bus, at beginning of school, after school, and violence erupts. What is it you want that bus driver to do? We talk about in regards to school safety, is that how important that component is, our bus drivers and what we're educating them on. I think that there has to be a conversation with them in regards to this dynamic, specifically. And from a staff perspective as well, staff admin, understanding what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, kind of a checklist of what actions need to happen from an administrative standpoint, and also from just simply an action to responding to that violence. So I think that gives you I wanted to warm everybody up to making sure that we're thinking about inside and outside, because there has to be that like I said, that marrying up of the two processes, and building that incident action plan. Is that a vast majority of creating an IAP is emergency services centric. Okay, there's quite a bit of it that's law enforcement, and probably just as much as fire and EMS is responsibilities. But there is also the school responsibility, actions that need to happen from the school's perspective. And it's important that you understand and have detailed knowledge of what it is that's going to happen from the minute that the bullets start flying in the building all the way till the very end, when we're doing that reunification component. as school administrators, we've got to be dialed in from the very beginning to the very end. And so I think that there's some value to understanding what the philosophy and concepts are. Integrated response is the where did it come from? And it really has been based on lessons learned from school shootings in America. All right, Columbine, that hallmark event, is that, I think oftentimes is that we look at that event in a very negative way, is that, they failed because they didn't get in the building and all of those things, is that, and there was a lot of good stuff that happened. All right. They established command posts. The only problem was is that EMS had a command post, fire had a command post, and law enforcement had a command post, their own. And so, but as we progress through this country, is that I will tell you this, is that a lot of the mistakes that happened to Columbine are continuing to happen. All right, because we're not creating this integrated response protocol. And by creating these protocols is that we can minimize some of the chaos. I can't eliminate it by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to make us a lot more effective as a community. And if we're implementing this protocol, let's cut to the chase, is that if we're implementing this protocol, this is about saving lives inside the building. All right, neutralizing the threat, one thing. All right, but then everything after that is that's what coordinated response is about, is saving as many lives as we possibly can. Multiple organizations have come out over the years and talked about the need for this, is that it really is best practices in America, to the point that the National Fire Protection Agency in 2018 came out with a standard for community response to an active shooter event. If you have not read that, it's a phenomenal roadmap on what needs to happen from a discipline standpoint, fire, law enforcement, EMS, and considerations in regards to building this process and that policy that we need to have that directs us on how we're going to perform. 5+1 philosophy is that I truly believe that the first 5 minutes of an active shooter event, and honestly, you can throw whatever number you want into that, but just as that first initial couple minutes of an active shooter event is 100% law enforcement. Find the threat, neutralize the threat. All right. And from a law enforcement perspective, we have dedicated so much time to that one particular task, is that, and when we evaluate everything that needs to happen, that's child's play. All right, is that's the easy stuff. Is that it's everything after that 1 minute, after that infinite 1 minute of all those tasks that need to be done, and making sure that not only are we training law enforcement to be able to deal with the unthinkable, but also thinking about the what's next. Is that, when we think about, the tasks that need to be done, I always say this to classes, is that, think about this, is that if you grab a notepad of paper and you start listing the tasks that need to be done, down to the smallest detail, is that you're going to end up with multiple pages of things that need to be done from an entire community, law enforcement, fire, schools. And now it's figuring out who's going to do this and when are they going to do it. Right? If we wait until that day, don't worry about it, I got it. All right. If that's the philosophy, that's a recipe for disaster. And that has been demonstrated multiple times across this country. And so it's about creating a plan and making sure that we have this plan, and those people that are going to implement this plan have an understanding of what it is, have the knowledge and the information that they need to be able to deploy the resources that we need. When we talk about creating an incident action plan, all right, it's not just a law enforcement function. Is that as a community, if you don't have a coordinated response plan, is that just looking at the school SRO or somebody at the police department and saying, hey, build this plan out for me, you're the cop, you know what it's supposed to be in it, is really shortchanging yourself, to be honest with you. is that there needs to be this collaboration and each discipline talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Is if I get district admin sitting around the table, in not in a literal sense, with law enforcement, fire, and emergency management, we're talking about what this community does, what we're going to do, what our capabilities are. All right, number one, what are our capabilities? And number two, what are we going to do? Is that then it becomes a more robust plan, because I don't care what you have on paper, what the plan is. What are the people? What's the knowledge base of the people that need to be able to implement the plan? Hospitals are an important piece to this. We're talking about a mass casualty event, and hospitals having input in regards to what your processes are on the ground. What is it that they want you to do? All right. Are we going to end up flying all of our casualties, or are we going to end up transporting and the potential of diverting? And so, bringing them in and having them part of that conversation is an important piece to it as well. These are all the different pieces of what I think an incident action plan needs to include. And we think about an active shooter event, and we oftentimes gravitate towards find the threat, neutralize the threat. All right, now we got to get the kids to the reunification site and get them back to their parents. All right, all of that is true. All right, that and that, but at the end of the day, there's a lot in the middle. And so if you're sitting here thinking, boy, why isn't he talking about reunification? Because that is a separate topic in itself. Okay, we had some internal conversations about this. Do we need to talk about reunification? And my response was no. Is that's too big of a topic to be able to talk about within the confines of creating an incident action plan for the building. Right? I think that reunification is a standalone piece. Just FYI, I'm going to give you some more information about reunification training in the future. But I did want to bring that up. Is if you're sitting back thinking, well, why isn't he talking about reunification? That's why. It was a conscious thought. So is that everything that we do after that threat is neutralized is based on command and control. We have to establish command and control as a community, that unified command, true unified command. All right. And it's about understanding that each agency that is responding has a responsibility. All right. Number one, to have people at the command post. All right. If you're sending your resources to my community to help respond to this particular event, make sure you bring a boss with you. I don't want somebody else's cops or firefighters in my community without a boss managing their people. So, is it any agency that has a response to that event? Send somebody to the command post, and understanding that law enforcement has function at command, obviously. Fire has function at command. Schools have function at command. And understanding that school and admin need to be advised of what their function is at unified command, and also trained on being an incident commander. What does it mean to work within that structure of unified command? That I think that training piece for them is important, and making sure that we have that knowledge base when they step into that command post. Right? Anybody that's ever been within a command post in a unified command structure as an incident commander, if you've ever had somebody in there that didn't know what they were doing in regards to being an IC, is that they got in your way more than they helped you. And so making sure that we have that knowledge base, and everybody knows what their responsibilities are. I've had people have pushback on regards to identifying locations. They're like, Scott, there's no way we can like pick a place and that place is going to work every time. I agree. Right? Creating an incident action plan does not mean that we follow it to the letter. All right. That's creating a baseline. And as this situation evolves, we need to evolve with it. All right. You got to be flexible and move with it. We all know that in the real world. But if I identify a location, is that as a community, we say, as the example here on this map, is that that intersection north of the school is a perfect place for a command post. All right, not too close, but close enough that I have eyes on the grounds, and I can manage this. I feel like I can manage this. Is that but Murphy's law? All right, realizing that we may have to shift, so build redundancy into it. All right, place up north, that's perfect. All right. But if that's not going to work, we're probably going to go south of it at that intersection south where the traffic light is. All right. Now that we've identified this, that school admin within that building knows where to go. All right. If we establish command that day, we decide where the command post is going to be that day, is that there has to be the additional communication piece to all those stakeholders that we need at command of where it's at. So if we set up this redundancy and they go to the first place and nobody's there, they go to the second place and there they are. And we've accomplished that. Look, the less we have to communicate, the better off we're going to be, especially at the very beginning of this. And so understanding, the values of doing that. Shannon's going to throw a polling question up for me. And it is, do your schools utilize designated points for rapid evacuation? Yes, no, or I don't know. Okay, you can go ahead and end it. 40 of you do, one of you do not, and 10 of you don't know. No judgment on not knowing, is that once again, just your homework. All right. And because I think that there's the need to know. Everybody here has a need to know. Um, Rally points, designated locations for that rapid evacuation. Is that I believe that it's not a good idea just simply advocate for rapid evacuation without giving people a place to run to. The short story is there's a lot of negatives that can come of that. Having the designated rally points, I'm a fan of multiple and different directions. Example here is that I've got a rally point to the north. So anybody's coming out of the north side of the building or close to the north side, they can run north. I've got one east and one south. And so by doing that is that I've given them multiple options. All right. That way they don't have to run by the building or in front of the building to get to the rally point. All right. It's kind of counterproductive for what we're dealing with. And number two is that it minimizes the security risk. All right. If we're just advocating for one of the three, don't care which one, just go. All right. Is that if there's anyone that is wanting to ambush the rally point, is that we've minimized that that security risk, honestly. Geography concerns are real. All right. Is that being conscious of ponds, rivers, and busy roads. All right. Is that if the example here is this broad avenue that runs in front of this school is a busy road. If students are rapidly evacuating from the building, I need to train them, educate them on not running out of the building and running directly across the street. All right. A lot of vehicular traffic on a daily basis on this street. And number two, emergency services coming down the street at a high rate of speed. So is the understanding that those are real world concerns. So thinking about how do we educate people to run away, right? Is that the more we talk to them, the more it's going to resonate in their brain. And the more it resonates in their brain, the more likely they are when they get to that elevated heart rate and adrenaline dumping into their body. If I'm advocating for staff and students to rapidly evacuate from the building, is that we need to provide security to them, right? We need to be able to provide medical care to the walking wounded. And so it's in this planning process is that not only from a school's perspective, I'm sharing with emergency services where these locations are. That becomes part of the incident action plan. That's your input. All right, is that these are where our rally points are, because street cops probably don't know where your rally points are. Shift supervisors probably don't know where your rally points are. And so educating them on where those rally points are and being able to articulate that, and then understanding that somebody from a law enforcement perspective needs to be assigned the responsibility of taking care of the rally points. Just an example, let's say that you're a community, and from a law enforcement perspective, all the cops are going to the school. We know that. But I got to take care of these rally points. So I'm going to assign a secondary law enforcement agency, an adjacent community. Hey, if something bad happens at our schools, I need you to assign a cop to these rally points. And oh, by the way, here's a map showing you where those rally points are and what our expectations are of you. And so we've checked that box. We can't wait to set up command and go, oh, we need to send a cop to the rally point. It's too late at that point. Is that you're going to have parents that are going to try and grab their kids from the rally point and take them home. It's going to be an absolute chaos. And so if we have those components in place to minimize that chaos at immediately or as quickly as possible, then we're going to be better off. And also from a school's perspective, thinking, all right, I got to get buses moving to these rally points. Can't wait. All right, this is something that needs to happen immediately. Get those buses moving to the rally points. Get those kids loaded onto the buses so that we can get them to the reunification sites. And what does that process look like to get those buses moving? All right, if we have a bus garage that's on the school campus of where the event happens, that changes the dynamics of that. So, what is your redundancy for having buses available to you? Staging areas. All right. Is that realizing that historically in this country, when there's an active shooter event, is that the cavalry is coming. All right. Every cop, firefighter, and ambulance driver in a 100-mile radius is coming to your building. That's it's only about half joking. And where do they all come? They all come to the building. And where do they park? Out on the street. And we end up blocking the street. I was recently in Maine, 6 weeks ago, and they had a swatting incident at a school up there. And is it was a true response from the community. All right. It was pretty far into the event before they realized it was a swatting incident. And what happened is that once they realized that it wasn't a real event, is that because of the dynamics of it, they were going to move their kids to the reunification point and send them home. All right. They loaded the buses with the kids and couldn't get the buses from the school to the reunification site, couldn't even get off campus because of the amount of police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances that were parked in the parking lot and on the streets and just occupying everything that wasn't grass, honestly. And so realizing that if we identify those that have a primary initial responsibility and give them those tasks, and everybody else that's coming, I want your help, I need your help, all right, but I don't need you at the school, all right. There's no data to support that I need 52 police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances parked in front of the school for that event. It enhances the chaos as opposed to minimizing. So we identify staging areas for each one of those disciplines, and that's where they go. If you don't have a job, go there. I'm going to give you a job here shortly, is the philosophy that we need to have. There are EMS bosses that I have met across the country that are big fans of having that EMS staging in close proximity to the command post, because there's got to be this influx of ambulances into the building, and them having eyes on it gives on that EMS staging area gives them a better feel of deploying those resources. Law enforcement staging, I'm a big fan of them being in parking lots. All right, cops are notorious for parking on the street, getting out of the car, and leaving it in the middle of the street. All right, that's well demonstrated in every community across America. So, in minimizing this, get them into the parking lots. Actually met some people was in a community where they started training cops about 5 years ago when responding to a critical incident. If you got out of the car and your feet were on asphalt, you were wrong, right? Is that they wanted they were started training cops to park in the grass because of this constant problem of congestion that we create. And so I thought that was unique. But thinking about these staging areas is getting those resources off of the street so that we're not creating unneeded congestion. Fire staging, you got fire trucks that are coming in. Is that thinking about the proximity to these staging areas and where they are in regards to your outer perimeter, I think has to be part of the conversation as well. And just thinking about it from a congestion standpoint and proximity to you for those resources. Talking about the perimeter, is that this shaded area that is this example is really about just giving you an example of the area in which we need to create that outer perimeter. I would say that this example is a little bit larger than what it needs to be, but I did that on purpose to just kind of demonstrate that area that we need to shade out. But that outer perimeter is where we're dropping those barricades. Is that Public Works, County Garage, whoever has barricade responsibilities, is that if we get on a map and identify where we're going to drop these barricades, how many barricades do I need to drop, and what direction of traffic am I wanting to stop? All right, is that if we provide that to those that have barricade responsibilities, they're dropping it as soon as the notification goes out of the critical incident. And so it's one less thing we have to worry about at the command post. Not only the outer perimeter, but the inner perimeter. State positioning of law enforcement outside of the building. That from a tactical perspective is that the cops that are inside the building, all of a sudden they push bad guy out a back door, all right, and he takes off running across the baseball field. Now all of a sudden we may need to deploy resources, all right, that are on the grounds towards that situation. Also, in regards to keeping parents away, all right, that's been demonstrated multiple times in this country in the past couple of years. Parents, an influx of them at the building. There's ways around minimizing that as well, but that's more of a communication piece as a district than it is incident action plan. This is an example of not only am I given a map, a visual aid to Public Works, but also giving them a worksheet on what those different traffic posts are. Where is it, and how many barricades? And then I'm also decided that I'm going to articulate what intersections need a cop and barricades, or can I accomplish it with just barricades? And by thinking through that process, all of a sudden now I know how many cops do I need for my outer perimeter, so I can pull those from law enforcement staging. Landing zones. Most communities anymore have designated areas of designated landing zones throughout the community. It's about identifying where those landing zones are in relation to the school, and knowing what that path is going to be from the school to that particular landing zone if we've got a casualty that we need to fly. If you don't already have predetermined landing zones, is that making sure that the locations that we pick, all right, football fields with artificial turf tend to not be conducive to helicopters because of the little rubber pellets that are down in the turf. That's bad for helicopter intake. Number two is that thinking about parking lots. All right, we may look at a map and say that parking lot's great for a landing zone. It's empty. Well, is it really empty Monday through Friday when school's in session type thing? And then thinking about who has that responsibility of establishing that landing zone. That's usually a fire function, honestly. Traffic flow, articulating what that traffic flow needs to look like in regards to uh, from the buses from the rally point to the reunification site. Is there a specific route that we want them to take? uh, EMS, from EMS staging to the school? Is there a particular part of the school that you want them to go to? And then going back to buses and reunification, it's not just about going to the reunification site. It's about understanding that this building, let's say it's on a college campus, your reunification site, and this particular building on the college campus, there's a particular door where students are being dropped off to go inside. Parents are coming in one side, students are being dropped off on the other side. And so that might be show actually showing the bus drivers is where are they supposed to go at the reunification site to drop the kids off. Ambulances, and they may not know the community, they may be mutual aid, and so giving them a map, being able to provide them a map as to where they need to go. Media is a monster that you have to feed. If you don't feed this monster, it's going to bite you, quite honestly. So is the understanding that we need to get out to the media where that media site is, and then have a representative there to speak to the media, a trained person to speak to the media and provide information to them. And really, it's about that mass notification piece as well, getting message out to parents and the community. Integration of the rescue task force concepts. Shannon's going to throw a polling question up here for me. Has your community implemented the rescue task force concept when responding to an active shooter event? And for the sake of time, Shannon, when you get to a right there, perfect. Um, 27 of you said yes, 8 of you said no, and 15 of you said I don't know. Perfect. Is that not going to spend too much time talking about this, but I think it's an important piece to this is understanding what it is we mean by rescue task force. This philosophy is that we have to get medics into the building as quickly as we possibly can. Don't have the time to clear an entire building and make it what we call a cold zone before we start treating the wounded. That doesn't work well in the real world. So it's embedding medics with a law enforcement component, taking them, the law enforcement component escorts the medics into the building to those that are wounded. It's not going into a gunfight, it's going into what we call the warm zone. All right. It's not 100% safe, but there's not bullets flying. And so, then escorting them to that through that warm zone to those that are injured. There's training that has to happen with this. Is that, I always say this, is that law enforcement and fire working in this environment together is like oil and water. But there, in all seriousness, there's education that has to happen from both sides. Law enforcement understanding what it is the medics need to do and how they need to do it. Medics need to understand how to move with law enforcement under that protocol. Thinking about movement. All right, we create this concept, but what does it look like? Where does everybody stage? The rescue task force teams start at the EMS staging area. All right. All right. How does that happen? Are we assigning specific cops to go to the EMS staging area, or is this something we're doing on the fly and trying to figure it out? Once we get enough cops, we'll go do it. All right. That's a bad recipe. So figuring out what that process looks like on the ground to get those cops, meet up with the medics, go into the building and do what it is that they need to do. And And so, as you start thinking about it, it becomes a little bit more complicated than just putting medics in the building with cops. EMS triage, this honestly, this is probably pretty complicated to implement as part of the integrated response protocol. This is an additional function of EMS where they're treating the walking wounded. As we do this evacuation of controlled evacuation of the building, is that they're treating those that need medical care, don't need to be transported, but needed medical care. So you've got multiple things happening, and to be able to establish an EMS triage area while everything else is going on takes some skill, takes some practice to be able to be proficient at it. Casualty collection points is just simply places around the building where we're putting those casualties and then being able to transport them to receive medical care. I'm a big advocate of just starting at the front of the building and going around to each door where I can park an ambulance. All right. I don't believe you can have too many casualty collection points. Let's say you end up with 5, is the example here, or you end up with 10. All right. But based on the layout of the building will really dictate how many casualty collection points you need. And being able to pull that ambulance up, put the wounded in the ambulance and go. It's about expediting that is really what it's about. And you need to be fluid with it, is that adjusting those casualty collection points based on the dynamics of the event. Evacuating the building. I will say this, is that real quick, is that we do a lockdown for an active shooter event, and all of the things that I've talked about in the incident action plan have occurred. Now we have to do that controlled evacuation of the building, and thinking about how that happens is that the process there has to be a communication piece where we're communicating with the entire building that we're going to be doing a controlled evacuation, whether it's through a PA announcement, emergency notification, whatever it happens to be. But that communication piece has to be there. And then that law enforcement function communicating with those that are in the classroom to be able to get them to open up the door. They shut the door, lock the door, barricade the door. All right. Is it understanding that we need to be able to get that door open and be able to get them down onto the buses and to the reunification site. So just thinking about how that's going to work in the real world. Oftentimes is that that's a gap when we evaluate protocols for schools. 911 center is there. I talked about them before, and the fact that they need to be trained in all aspects of this. In short, is that when we look at events that have failed in this country, communication is the number one responsibility, is normally the number one reason. And it's about opening up that communication pipeline as wide as we can get it. And so it's through increasing that knowledge base. Not only am I educating them on active shooter response, but they know what the incident action plan is. If I can put that in front of them, all of a sudden we get a whole lot smarter as a community, and them understanding what it is the schools are doing and how they're doing it. Education, more training, making sure that we know what our primary initial responsibilities are. Secondary law enforcement, mutual aid fire departments know what it is that we want them to do. Come help, but just don't come to the building is really what it's about. If I haven't assigned you a responsibility, don't come to the building. Send somebody to the command post, go to staging, and we're rocking and rolling in regards to what is it we need to do. I've tried really hard not to sell StrataSite during this entire webinar, right? That's not why you came. But I will tell you this, is that if you don't have an incident action plan, give me a call, all right? Because we're going to be able to check all of the boxes that we did here. You have an incident action plan. It's in a binder, all right? It's a policy. Give me a call. I'm going to show you what we can do, all right? We've got 911 center, rapid SOS integration. I've got mass notification capabilities where I can push this plan out to anybody and everybody that we want to have it on their phones. Sharing the plan, whether it's that collaboration, that building of the plan, or once the plan is done, being able to put it in people's hands. Learning management system so that we can create quizzes for everybody. And then document storage, building layouts, critical incident maps, emergency operation plans, photos, videos. Doesn't matter what it is that you can store it. Whatever's going to make us smarter and better as a community, quite honestly, is that we can do it for you. And I will say this before I click the next slide. This is what I told the software developers at the very beginning. Number one, it's got to be easy to use. Number two, it has to be cheap enough that anybody and everybody that wants it can afford it. And I think that we've checked those two boxes, quite honestly. Real quick, before we go to questions and answers, 5 minutes till. February 12th, 2025 at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, AM, is that we're going to talk about reunification, best practices and lessons learned. And I'm going to be joined by a host, a co-host. And I will tell you this, is that not only is he one of the smartest dudes in America in regards to school safety, but reunification is a passion of his. I think that if you're involved in schools in any way, shape, or form, school administrators, school staff, SRO, cop, emergency management, you're going to want to sit through this webinar. You're going to walk away with some tools in regards to that reunification process. All right. That being said, is that Shannon, my co-host, do you have any questions? Did any questions come up throughout the day, throughout the hour?
Scott, did you want me to go ahead and read some to you here?
Yeah.
Does StrataSite have an accountability function and an attendance function?
No, we do not. Is that the tool that you speak of in regards to accountability is through visitor management software, i.e. Raptor, Rave, all of those. No, that's we don't do that. No, we integrate with those processes in regards to that link messaging that I spoke, but we do not. No.
Okay, there's one more. What ICS courses do you recommend at the district admin and school principal levels? ICS 700.
Great question. Is that, and I just kind of hit on that in regards to that training. ICS 100, 200, and 700. Those three classes, I think, will build the foundation for that school administrator in regards to the philosophy that FEMA has in regards to incident command. Now, once you've gone through those classes, you can do them online. Once you go through those classes, I think that the next step for you is to then pick up the phone and call the local fire chief and say, Chief, I just went through these classes. I need you to come down to my office and explain them to me. And the reason that I say the fire chief as opposed to an SRO or police chief or the law enforcement is that fire are the subject matter experts on incident command. They do it every doggone day. They do incident command for a dumpster fire, quite honestly. And so is that getting then that input from your community subject matter expert on how they run incident command. There's the FEMA philosophy, and then there's the real world application within your community. And I think that those are two important pieces, not only from that unified command for a critical incident, but as a school administrator, me being able to manage other emergencies, less impactful emergencies in my school building, that training will help significantly. Any other questions?
A few people asked where they could find this webinar after the fact. We'll be posting to our website and YouTube channel, so it will be available afterwards. Outside of that, I'm really just seeing kind of comments on future topics, which is great, and we'll kind of bear that in mind. But Scott, I think that you kind of covered everything that has been dropped in the Q&A so far. So I think we're in a good spot to maybe wrap up. And then, like Scott mentioned, we'll be back with a reunification webinar in February, and I'll keep track of the other topics that were noted in the chat for future reference.
Perfect. And Shannon, and everybody, before you go, is that if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, either way. All right. And obviously, if you want to talk about StrataSite and the benefits of it, obviously, I'd love to hear from you. But even if you just have a question, feel free to reach out to me. I promise I will try not to turn it into a sales call. No, in all seriousness, if you just have questions, give me a call. Be more than happy to help you out. So, with that, is that you are all free to leave, and I truly appreciate your time, and I hope that there was some value. You're going to get an evaluation in regards to this class. Please fill it out. Give us feedback, and good and bad. Honestly, is that we want to provide value to people in regards to school safety, honestly, at the end of the day. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe.